It's Monday, October 7th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. And it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And for once, it's a hell of a day for me to not be lying because it is Monday, October 7th at almost 1:30 in the morning. We are taping this solo recap to Sunday Night Football because, wow, the delay, the penalties, everything along the way, a slog of a game ended very late for us here. So if I'm delirious on this particular solo recap, you guys will just have to forgive me on this one. I before I get into the recap here, I do have to share this note from at Front Office NFL. The producer Colin was kind enough to send me. Today is the longest day of NFL football since at least the 1970 merger. 15 hours and 27 minutes. The London game, the London game kicked off at 9:32 a.m. Eastern on Sunday, and Sunday Night Football ended at 12:59 a.m. on Monday. Hell of a day to talk ball. Hell of a long day to talk ball. But let's get into this Sunday Night Football game. Cowboys 20, Steelers 17. Man, again, it was a slog of a game. It was a slow game. At the half, it was 6-3. So, yeah, fantasy points just galore in this one. Can you taste the sarcasm in my voice? But I do actually think we have a couple of big picture takeaways that are worth unpacking in this one somehow. First of all, Dallas Cowboys side of this. You typically come into a Cowboys game, especially in the year 2024, and we know this is a top-heavy unit, right? They've got Dak Prescott, they've got CeeDee Lamb, and then a bunch of guys. Right? That's kind of the typical talking point with the Dallas Cowboys, especially now that Brandon Cooks is not playing good football before he got hurt anyways, but especially now that Cooks is out of the mix, it's kind of like I've been waiting for a while now. I've been saying that on the preview show and in my preview article. It's kind of like boring talking about the Cowboys because it's just, okay, yeah, we're not really... Jake Ferguson is definitely a tight end. We'll talk about him in a second. But other than that, like there's not a lot of ancillary players to discuss here. What are we going to talk about in the backfield with this running back committee? Well, on Sunday night / Monday morning, we got some answers to this. We actually got big performances from some of these ancillary Cowboys players. Let's start with the man of the night, producer Colin's favorite player in the NFL, the number one wide receiver of his heart and the number one wide receiver of the Dallas Cowboys, Jayden Tolbert. 10 targets, 7 catches, 87 yards, and the game-winning touchdown after getting banged up the play before. It was a hell of a night for Tolbert, and it really started earlier. Obviously, I thought it was like poetic that he got the game-winning touchdown here because he had played so well all night. And Tolbert is such an interesting player. Again, I joke about producer Colin sending me every like little nugget from training camp about Tolbert having this breakout season, but it was an interesting storyline to follow in the offseason, especially because I joked about on Twitter tonight, digging through the couch cushions to find my very last unsold Jayden Tolbert stock. I do have a little bit of Jayden Tolbert stock. The guy had a really interesting reception perception prospect profile. And frankly, like I said, the Cowboys need somebody else to step up in this passing game beyond CeeDee Lamb, especially on a night like tonight when CeeDee Lamb was kind of blanked a little bit. He went blanked, 5 catches, 62 yards, whatever, but clearly was not the focal point of the passing game. And Tolbert kind of fits in that role that Michael Gallup vacated, that vertical X receiver role where you're pushing the ball downfield, you're winning in tight coverage, you're also running curls and comebacks that are kind of the basis of this offense. A lot of curls, a lot of hitches, things like that. Tolbert can do that stuff. That's what he did at South Alabama. That's why I thought he was an interesting, late round 3, early round 4 type of prospect. He obviously does nothing really in his first 2 seasons, especially his rookie year. He really did nothing. But he's kind of coming on a little bit this year. He's 6% rostered in Yahoo leagues right now. And, as long as Brandon Cooks is out and Brandon Cooks is on IR now, I do think Tolbert's going to be a little bit interesting. And I think people are kind of slow to the uptake on this one because he's been getting a decent bit of playing time even before this. They faced the Lions, do the Dallas Cowboys in week 6. The perimeter passing coverage is better in Detroit than the slot coverage, but still a potentially interesting spot there in what could be a high scoring game. Obviously, Jake Ferguson, great night. He's one of the few answers at tight end this year. Really shows you why he's a yards after catch player. But again, I think Tolbert and then Rico Dowdle is the other big story here. 20 carries for Dowdle to 6 for Ezekiel Elliott. 2 catches, 27 yards, and a touchdown as well. He almost fumbled the game away at the very final moments there at the goal line. But other than that, super clean night for Dowdle. Worth noting that producer Colin and I were talking about this too before, like once Tyler Guyton went out, this offensive line just played a lot more physical, really pushed the Steelers around in the second half. I thought that was an encouraging note. I don't know that Dowdle's ever going to be this like explosive playmaker, but if you can give him the ball 20 times and he could be efficient, like a steady runner, that's a big deal for this team. So Dowdle's a guy who's been quietly taking over this backfield anyways. And I think that we got a kind of statement from him tonight, or this morning, tonight, whatever the hell it is, on that regard. So that's what I care about from this game on the Cowboys side. What I don't care about is, man, I'm back to like not caring about the Steelers offense anymore. A variety of different things are going on here. You know, I think they do some interesting stuff. You know, I think they do some cool stuff with the tight ends. Justin Fields shows you every now and again why he's a really interesting player. But it's just a slog. It's so limited. Limited is the word of the Steelers offense. Just, I don't know. There's not a lot of juice here. There's not a lot of excitement. Najee Harris, this running game is supposed to be the identity of the team, and it's awful. Najee Harris has one game over, and not even over, just at 4 yards per carry this year. Everything else he's been under 4 yards per carry. He was under that again tonight, 14 carries for 42 yards. If you have to start Najee Harris at this point in your fantasy team is a disaster. The run game is supposed to be the identity of this team, like I said, and it is a nightmare. Flipping to the passing game, you know, it definitely carried a greater burden in week 4. I was excited about some of what I saw from Justin Fields. You didn't see it in this game, when they're down 4 defensive ends on the other side. Like on the Cowboys are deeply injured pass rusher right now. They also have injuries in the secondary. The Steelers still couldn't consistently move the ball. And kind of most troubling of all this is the lack of George Pickens' involvement. You guys know, I've been saying on the show that Pickens has been playing really well, I think, in isolation. He has 7 targets in this game, but I don't have the final snap counts in front of me here, but Pickens was kind of rotating on and off the field as a wide receiver 3. There's some, you know, I'm not here to make reports or rumors or anything, but there is at least some whispers that there's, you know, maybe he's in the doghouse or something like that. You know, we've seen flare-ups with Pickens in his first couple of seasons. So that's a situation I would say to monitor, especially as we know there's a lot of wide receiver trade rumors kind of permeating around the NFL right now. Bottom line, Pittsburgh Steelers offense is lifeless. That's a familiar story. We also shouldn't be surprised by any of that. You know, I think because Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, who is still getting a lot of publicity, still getting a lot of pop on, you know, showing him on the sidelines, the whole thing. I don't know that Russell Wilson's going to do any better in this offense, by the way, especially with the run game being what it is. Because those guys are big names, I think this quarterback situation kind of got billed as a, really good solution for the Steelers. This is a good quarterback battle. I think because of the names and the lack of resources spent to get those guys, that was kind of the pitch. But this is not a good quarterback room. It's not a good quarterback situation. And teams don't just fall ass backwards into good solutions when they're trying to dig themselves out of a massive hole left by a quarterback bust. And that's what they're dealing with right now. The Kenny Pickett flameout pick still is kind of rearing its ugly head on this roster. You don't just turn around and become a high-flying offense. The 2024 Steelers do not look like they're going to be an exception to that. So that was Sunday Night Football. That's the main takeaways here. We care about the Cowboys players stepping up, the ancillary guys there. We don't really care about much of what's going on in Pittsburgh right now. And with the Pittsburgh Steelers going forward, I think that's probably going to remain the case. Although a matchup in Week 6 against the Raiders will at least have us kind of re-examining those priors and everything like that. All right. With that, we can toss to the rest of the show with Andy Behrens as we break down the games that you care about the most from Week 5, the games you should sort of care about, and the games that definitely could have been an email. Let's roll the clip. All right. Joining us now is my good pal, Andy Behrens. Andy, what's going on, buddy?
The Bears are back. That's what's going on. Are people talking about anything else? I don't know. In my world, that's all that's going on. Did something else happen today?
A few other things happened today. I'm glad I'm glad you've got this energy. I'm glad you're gloating about a blowout win over the Carolina Panthers. That feels
I love
really
the
good.
Panthers. Can I just say for a moment how deeply and sincerely I love the Panthers as a Bears fan?
I'm really happy for you, pal. I'm really happy for you. We are not going to. I don't know if you know this, Andy, but remember, we break games into 3 categories here on the recap show. We do the games we really care about off the top. We do the games we sort of care about in part 2. We don't get to games like the Bears blowing out the Panthers until this game could have been an email. So I'll let you write.
You're probably going to give Bears Panthers its own pod on like the 301 podcast, right? I mean, it earned it.
I mean, dude, Nate Tice might. I only have a minor, supporting actor role on that particular program, so that's in Nate's hands. He might want to talk about the cadence exchange or whatever was going on between the center and Caleb Williams there. He might have a full breakdown on it. I'm sure Nate's already done a full breakdown on it. All right, but seriously, Andy, stop hijacking the show to talk about the damn Bears off the very top of the program. Let's get into the games that we really care about. Which, yes, Andy does really care about Bears blowing out the Panthers, but the rest of America, the rest of the human race doesn't care about it as much. We do care about Ravens 41, Bengals 38. What a wild, joyous game. Lots of passing production in this one. Andy, where do you want to start?
That is, it's amazing that you characterize it that way, because that's the first thing I wrote in my scant notes on this game. An absolutely joyous game. This is why we enjoy the sport. This is why we play fantasy. This is why we're tied to the league. It was great. First of all, on the Cincinnati side, I guess, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, both phenomenal. Each of them multiple scores. Chase gave us 10 for 193 and a couple of touchdowns. Just an absolutely phenomenal game. Burrow and Lamar combined for 9 passing touchdowns? Crazy. Just really, really good. Lamar Jackson threw 3 touchdowns to tight ends, none of whom were Mark Andrews. That's a tough one. Andrews was involved, but I mean, what does that mean in a game in which everyone was involved? It just really, really fun. Derrick Henry having a somewhat quiet day until he made the play that decided the game, the 50-plus yard run in OT. Just twists and turns, really fun. And Cincinnati right now, while being a fantasy party, because they have to try to stay ahead of their own defense's, struggles. This is a really rough road for them now.
Yeah, Cincinnati's definitely in trouble from a team perspective. It was great to see their offense get rolling here. You've mentioned this a lot on the pod, that the Ravens secondary is not really the unit that we are used to seeing. Yeah. There are mistakes back there. There are new players they're breaking in, things like that. Which, by the way, when we talk about the Bills passing game later on, let's remember that this secondary clamped down the Bills passing game in week 4. And here, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, who are certainly better than I think all of the receivers on Buffalo, like combined into one player, still wouldn't be as good as Jamar Chase or something like that. So that obviously there's difference in talent levels here, but those guys went wild, which, Andy, to me, I thought, coming into this game, the Ravens were dead last in neutral pass rate in weeks 3 and week 4. They were very content to just, hey, we're going to saddle up the big dog Derrick Henry for a bunch of carries, and we're just going to pound teams into oblivion. I really thought that was how this game was going to go, because we all knew that the Bengals' run defense is nothing to write home about. I thought it was super encouraging to see that when Cincinnati gave fight through the air, that Baltimore could give it back. And especially it was in the way that they did it too. This is from Next Gen Stats. Lamar Jackson completed 10 of 15 passes in the intermediate area of the field, and he was 8 of 11 on passes against man coverage for 97 yards and 3 touchdowns. That was the most ever in a game in his career, which I thought was interesting. That's a pretty stark contrast to some of the passing performances we got from Baltimore, especially to start the year, when it's very screen heavy, gadgety, targets to running backs, stuff like that. We had like Zay Flowers getting real downfield targets. We had Rashad Bateman making plays along the sideline. As you mentioned, all 3 of the tight ends getting involved here to some degree. So, again, the Bengals defense is not good. That's a caveat that needs to be applied to this particular result, but still encouraging to see that when Baltimore is challenged, they can actually get out there and throw the ball a little bit as well.
Yeah, it actually a huge development. I'm glad you called it out, because entering this one, the previous 2 games, Lamar had only attempted 33 passes, right? And it was a winning formula, clearly. So really, really good to see them in a shootout and succeed in a shootout, again, with the caveat that it was Cincinnati's defense. I do think that like the idea that a passing game can pick on Baltimore and, they just couldn't get stops. And it is not last year's version of the Ravens defense. And that has to do with personnel. And that has to do with the fact that all the coaches are gone. And it's just a defense that's in a little bit of a transitional place right now. Like Baltimore's defense is actually showing up on some waiver wires in a handful of my leagues, and I get it. They haven't been great, and they were facing an offense that was going to put up some numbers against them. Man, I don't know. And sometimes Joe Burrow is not a very sympathetic figure, but I find him a little bit sympathetic right now. I mean, like he played so well, and he's been playing so well all year, and that offense is so fun. And I would love to see this version of the Bengals make a deep postseason run, but it's just unimaginable with this defense.
Yeah, I mean, Burrow said after the game, like, we are not a championship level team, and it is very frustrating. I agree. I don't think Burrow's completely innocent and all that. There was at least a couple throws where I thought he maybe passed up some downfield stuff. You can nitpick things like that with him all day long. Obviously, he is not the biggest problem with this team, but they're certainly going to be, as Scott calls it, like the carnival team of this season, where they're just going to give up points on the other side and Burrow's going to have to throw them back in the game. I don't know. Not too many other major developments in this one. The only other thing I would note is that Zach Moss left the game late with an ankle injury. Obviously, Chase Brown caught a touchdown in this game. He led the team with 12 carries for 46 yards. So this was obviously not the matchup to really start Chase Brown. If you did have to play him, great. You escaped at the touchdown. But this is why even when people were dropping Chase Brown early on in the year, like, he's not the starter, Zach Moss is the starter. This is why you want to hang on to both of these guys because, hey, now if Zach Moss, knock on wood, has to miss any time with this ankle injury, he gets a game. We get a game against the Giants next week where Chase Brown would probably be ranked certainly within the top 15 backs.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to call out too. It was mostly Zach Moss's backfield, I want to say, just based on my casual check-ins on this game. It seemed like it was mostly Zach Moss's backfield before the injury, but that is a very good call out because the matchup ahead seems pretty friendly.
All right, let's move on to the next game here, which was another ultra exciting finish at the 1 p.m. Eastern time slot here. Jaguars 37. Colts 34. There are no longer any winless teams in the NFL, Andy Behrens.
7 scores in the fourth quarter was wild. Two of them covered 60 plus yards. This was such a fun finish. Man, it was probably the best version that we can expect of Trevor Lawrence. He had just a beautiful big play touchdown to Brian Thomas Jr. early in the game. Pretty exciting to just see a receiver with that, that sort of size, that sort of mass, moving that quickly, well-thrown ball. Like one thing, I don't know, you can criticize an awful lot about Trevor Lawrence over the past couple of years. That guy throws a great deep ball. We saw it with Thomas. Later, he hit another beautiful deep shot to Christian Kirk that set up one of the many fourth quarter touchdowns. On the Jacksonville side, also, we saw a lot of Tank Bigsby early and late. He bowled into the end zone for a highlight TD, and then he had that fourth quarter TD that was, I want to say, 65 yards, and it involved a little bit of patience and a killer stiff arm, and then a little breakaway speed and a premature celebrate. It was everything I like in a run. That was awesome. So Tank Bigsby, and of course the Yahoo Fantasy handle anointed him the RB1 in Jacksonville, and I don't know that I can argue. It's probably one of the biggest developments of the day for fantasy purposes, right? Bigsby actually outsnaps Travis Etienne a little bit. Etienne was fine, caught a bunch of passes, I think 60 scrimmage yards on the day, but Bigsby had a couple of really special plays, both of which ended in touchdowns. And again, it wasn't some situation where Etienne was dinged, and so we saw a little bit of Bigsby. Bigsby was super involved early in the game. On the other side, man, we saw a lot of Josh Downs. That guy's really good. It's pretty clearly better for Michael Pittman and Josh Downs in this entire passing game when Joe Flacco is at the controls. That does not mean that they shouldn't start a healthy Anthony Richardson when he's healthy, right? He's just at a place in his developmental arc where he's got to play. But it is, I mean, man, it's a whole lot easier to roll out Downs and Pittman when we know we're getting Joe Flacco in just a normal passing game.
Yeah, I'll put a pin in the Colts thing for a second. Go back to what you mentioned about Jacksonville and Tank Bigsby. Coach Speak Index on Twitter at Coach Speak Index noted that after the game, Doug Peterson was asked, whether Tank Bigsby is going to replace Travis Etienne atop the depth chart. And Peterson said, quote, "No, not at all. Travis is our guy. Tank had a good game. That's just the way games go." Coach Speak Index also notes that Doug Peterson has a 35% reliability rating on depth chart. Coach Speak. So,
I mean, also if you're Doug Peterson right now, you gotta lean on whatever works.
Oh yeah, yeah. You have no. If they had lost this game, I think there's a pretty good chance Doug might have gotten fired. That was a very uncomfortable building. So yeah, no. I mean, look, Doug Peterson can obviously say whatever he wants, and then a whole nother thing might happen. And yeah, I mean, Bigsby, obviously some of his results are going to be kind of inflated by big plays, but shoot, the dude is making big plays. When's the last time you saw Travis Etienne big play? It's kind of been a minute. So I do think we will continue to see more and more of Tank Bigsby. They've just been saying this forever, that they all, like, again, regardless of that quote, they've been wanting to mix up these carries for quite some time now. So I do think Etienne, all this means is that Etienne is not like a locked in, set it and forget it every week, RB1 or maybe even RB2. Bigsby's going to continue to eat in here. Brian Thomas Jr. is so good. So good. He's so good, man. And I had somebody ask me this week, is it possible that Brian Thomas Jr. could just be the best receiver from this draft class? And I'm like, maybe the best from this draft class is kind of a stretch, because I loved all top three of those dudes as prospects. And I think everybody's basically been as they were billed to be. Rome's not going to get the targets this year. We know. I love how 5 games into his career, people are like, he's not getting the targets. And it's like all we said all summer was he's not going to get the targets. Like we're aware that this was going to happen. That's kind of funny. But all those dudes, like watching them, have all been very good. But then you see Brian Thomas put up a game like this. You're like, man, I don't know. Maybe he could be. I still think he probably won't. But man, he's a great player and exactly what they needed there. And he is certainly somebody that probably is an every week set it and forget it starter, even if this was a great matchup for him.
Yeah, he's also one of those, like, not every rookie who's like one of these size speed combo guys. You don't always see the speed their first year, right? Like, it seems like they're just like a beat behind, but that is not the case here. Like he is a burner, and he's huge and hyper athletic. And man, that guy's good. Like, it's just such a good pairing between quarterback and receiver too. Again, whatever you think of Trevor Lawrence, one thing he does really well is throw the deep ball. He can get it outside the numbers deep. Like, he does not lack an arm, and that certainly suits Thomas. He's super impressive.
Yeah, sometimes it's just as simple as they weren't really using Calvin Ridley in a role that made sense for his skill set, so they just kind of plucked a faster version of just a fast player who also happened to be way more refined than I expected coming into the league, and they're just getting way better results out of it. Pretty simple equation there. Back to the Indianapolis side. Yeah, I honestly, watching this game, it's frustrating for a number of different reasons from just the passing game perspective here, Andy, because you're right. It's just so much. I mean, it's just objectively better with Joe Flacco from a stats perspective for these wide receivers. And I happen to think this wide receiver room is really, really good. So that is frustrating. The other thing that's frustrating is just, why couldn't any other team sign Joe Flacco? Why couldn't? It's nice that we get these little moments in the sun, but Flacco is available to so many other teams with a legitimately shaky quarterback situation. And Anthony Richardson definitely is a shaky player right now, but there's no oh man, when he's out there, we have no shot to win a game, like it was with Bryce Young in Carolina. They're not going to bench Anthony Richardson or anything like that. They've got to see this thing through. And he's another guy. It's we knew he was going to be developmental, and they're 2-3. Their season is not over, but man, so many other teams have shaky quarterback situations. You didn't just want to sign the guy who was really good at the end of last year with the Cleveland Browns. No, let's let the Colts have him. So that is frustrating. Multiple frustrating things there. And we haven't said the name Alec Pierce yet, who led this receiving room with 134 yards on 3 targets. Alec Pierce is probably the most hilarious receiver in the league right now, Andy. And I say that mostly complimentary, because he is just he does 2 things. He stretches out the defense, and sometimes if you just throw that thing up to him, he's gonna get it, and that's pretty much it. But man, that's a pretty valuable thing when you actually have a quarterback like Richardson or Flacco that can actually activate that area of the field, unlike what they had for most of last year.
Yeah, and it pairs really well with Pittman and Downs too, right? Like it's guys who just do different things, operate in different levels of the field. And Pierce seems like, and that's so well said too, because obviously Anthony Richardson can push the ball like 65 yards downfield if he needs to, and Pierce can get there. And Flacco's got plenty of arm as well. So it's a crazy highlight game from Alec Pierce, who is barely involved. And then suddenly you look at the box score and he's leading the team in receiving yards. Just an impressive player in a weird role that you can't count on every week, but you can probably count on, I don't know, 4 or 5 times a season.
Yeah, his yards per reception average by the end of the year is going to be absurd. It was 23.4 before this game when he averaged 44.7 yards per reception. So that's going to be pretty crazy. Wild stuff there. Kind of a bummer that, again, we whenever Richardson's back there, and he probably gets back next week, we can't necessarily feel confident about starting a lot of these receivers. But hey, hopefully it gets better for Anthony Richardson as the year wears on. Let's stick in the AFC South and go to our next game here. Texans 23, Bills 20. Man, Andy, I have a lot to say on this game. Watched it very closely, but I want to hear what you thought about this first.
Obviously, wild end game situation that's going to get discussed for a few days, right? Buffalo just attempting a series of passes from their own end zone, and like leaving Houston with time and field position to attempt a game-winning field goal that, that probably could have been averted. I realized that Houston had timeouts left, but man, you gotta make them use them. I think, right? Fairbairn drills a late field goal. It just didn't have to end that way. We could have gotten more football there. So that's one thing. I actually feel like the biggest unknown right now coming out of that game, the Nico Collins injury. He was on his way to another stellar game. Nico Collins, of course, was, entered the week like on pace for 2,000 receiving yards for the season, got an early long touchdown. So his fantasy day was fine, but he comes away with a hamstring injury. So that's a huge worry. And Stroud was so locked in, particularly while Nico was actually playing, right? He didn't throw an incompletion until there was like a minute and a half left in the first half. He's just, he's so good so often when there are just little fires burning all around him, right? He's not super mobile, or we don't think of him that way, and he doesn't put up huge rushing totals, but man, he can escape trouble really, really well. And not only like just escape trouble, but sometimes escape trouble, and in the Josh Allen way, he can make plays, when everything is going to hell around him. So Stroud, really impressive to me. But again, the Nico Collins injury is a huge deal there. And the thing that I'll say on the Buffalo side is there was an exact moment when I was starting to write. I was writing down, a question about whether this Bills offense, this version of the offense with this receiving core, has the necessary tools to actually come back from like a multi-score deficit. And immediately they hit that long yards after catch touchdown to Keon Coleman, which I think was his only successful catch of the day, right? Like miraculous play on 4th and 5. So he's obviously a work in progress. And there are some near spectacular plays that he doesn't quite haul in, and he has some rough moments, but man, he also gives you one like that. So there's a little bit of hope with him, but you take Khalil Shakir out of that equation, and it's just, it's rough for that receiving core.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about the Bills before we get back to the Texans here. It really dawned on me at one point just how rough this outside wide receiver situation is when I see, just Matt Collins mess up on a route on 3rd down, and then immediately the Bills are punting the ball. And do you know who's the gunner going down to try to tackle the punt returner? It's Matt Collins.
Matt Collins,
the dude they just threw the ball to on 3rd down. They're just like at this with where, just Matt Collins is Matt Collins. And then like with where Keon Coleman is right now as an NFL player, that they are only throwing out as an outside receiver and like just being a jump ball dude. They're just kind of drawn dead from the outside receiver position right now. They're not getting a lot of separation. And yeah, in the first 3 weeks of the season, when you're playing like the Cardinals and what we know now is a bad Miami Dolphins team, when you're playing those groups, like, yeah, sure, you can go ahead and dunk on bad defenses and stuff like that, because I think this is a well-constructed offense with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But then when you go against two pretty good defenses with good players in the secondary, even if the Ravens are not playing up to their standards, they still have good cornerbacks back there. And the Texans, Kamar Lasser has been really good as a rookie, and Derek Stingley is one of the best corners in the NFL. I think you're just going to get thumped here like you did in this one. I mean, Josh Allen has a stat line in this game that every time I look at it, I just feel like the API or the data provider is like I keep wanting to refresh it, because he's completed 9 passes for 9 out of 30 passes in this game. Like that feels like a typo. That feels like a rookie year Josh Allen stat. Yep. That feels like when we thought Josh Allen was what Anthony Richardson is. Like that this feels like it's not updating correctly, but that's just where they're at from an outside receiver perspective. And yeah, like Khalil Shakir is a good player. I really like Khalil Shakir, but like your passing attack can't completely go down the toilet when Khalil Shakir misses a game.
Also, he's like an 80% of the time in the slot kind of guy.
Exactly.
Like we talked about this in the preseason. They're all slot guys.
Exactly. And like they can't get Curtis Samuel on the field for whatever reason. That's a strange one to me. And again, like we've just got Matt Collins and Keon Coleman out there running all the routes, and we are not getting any separation on those plays against good corners. So just again, when they go against good teams, I think this is going to be an issue. They can dunk on bad teams for sure. Jacksonville in week 3. Yeah, you can crush Jacksonville with some receivers who can't get separation consistently. That's fine. And again, like the schedule is not crazy. They do have the Jets next week. Titans are a pretty good defense. Then it lightens up before a week 11 game with Kansas City. So I just feel like the Josh Allen experience is going to be bumpier from a fantasy quarterback perspective more than what we're used to.
I'm not your salary cap guy, but there is a pretty good veteran outside receiver currently available on the trade market. I'll just throw that out there. He'd look pretty good with Buffalo.
Yeah, we'll talk about the Jets in the next section here. My number one thought watching the Jets offense this morning was that is not a Devontae Adams unit. That is not a unit that's a Devontae Adams away from salvation. I watch Buffalo. I'm like, yeah, you drop Devontae Adams on here and we might be cooking. Like everybody goes down a peg. We get some players like that he can't get open. We drop Devontae Adams in here, but obviously it sounds like he just wants to play with quarterbacks that he's played with before. So that's where the Bills offense is. Flipping back to the Texans, this is one of those games, Andy, where I come away, and I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, yeah, you take away Nico Collins, sure, but like they have other good receivers, and like they do. But what we know now, 5 weeks into the NFL season, is that Nico Collins is far and away the alpha of this room, and Steph Diggs is like I think he's a good 2 at this point. He's still a good player, but I think he's probably more of a 2. And Tank Dell is just not the dude that he was last year. Maybe I think he probably will be at some point this year, but right now he's not. And then there's just a significant drop off from Joe Mixon to Cam Akers and Dare Ungwale, man. Like, so the Texans are just not the unit that we thought they were because they don't have the guys that they need out there.
Yeah, I'd been like early in the practice week. It seemed like the vibes were good with Joe Mixon too, right? And he had practiced the Friday before, at least in a limited way, which is usually a good sign. But not having him here was a big deal. And like Ungwale is fine. Cam Akers is maybe not fine, but he did find the end zone, right? I can't wait. Like, there's still a couple leagues where I gotta start Cam Akers because I'm just in a terrible situation, and I can't wait for this period of the season to be over. I'm pretty done with Akers time.
Oh yeah, well, I don't know. I told you about the Kings Classic lineup where I have Cam Akers and I had to throw him back in the flex spot. I am a little concerned what I'm going to do with that flex spot without Cam Akers, but that's that league. Yeah. For most normal people, I think we're all excited to not have to do the Cam Akers thing, because it is just like, please, Lord God above, get me a touchdown, and maybe I'll be good for the rest of the year if you can grant me that little bit of mercy. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we will talk about those New York Jets in the London game on the other side. All right, Andy, we're back. Vikings 23, Jets 17. Oh boy, this was a slog. I'm going to say let's put the Vikings aside for a second, even though they won the game, and let's talk about the New York Jets here for a second, because I think that's what most people will be talking about coming out of this game. Both Jets running backs averaged 2.6 yards per rush and Aaron Rodgers averaged 4.5 yards per pass attempt. And buddy, it felt like it. It felt like it. So, again, like I said earlier, I do not think this unit is just like okay, look, you see Allen Lazard like dropping passes in critical moments. You're like, yes, obviously, if they had another good wide receiver there, that would be helpful. But there's just so many other things that are wrong with this unit right now. Dude, they're coming in here at a disadvantage every single week because Nathaniel Hackett is their offense coordinator. Period. At the same time, though, they make 30 mistakes a game like 30 little mistakes that shouldn't sink your entire offense, like drops, being slightly on a different page between quarterback and wide receiver with Rodgers and Garrett Wilson, offensive line, missed assignments, stuff like that. Just rigidity overall from your quarterback. These things shouldn't sink your team, but when you do all of them and all the time, it makes for an offense that, like I said, it was a slog this morning.
And it paints a picture of a coaching staff, right? When there's a little something wrong with like every position group, which is the way it feels right now. And it certainly feels like the sum of the parts should be greater than all this, right? There's a lot of talent on this roster. This was an all-time game. And granted, you and I were both on Fantasy Football Live this morning, like while this game was going on. So it was one of those things where like you're attentive to one thing and then you're peeking at the game itself. But it felt like just an all-time game in terms of Aaron Rodgers looking both old and exasperated. And, he's never been one who completely hides his emotions on the field, right? Like you could definitely tell when Aaron Rodgers is frustrated and flummoxed. And it was an awful lot of that. I felt like at one point, I think I said to you just before FFL that I felt like every time I looked up, Tyler Conklin was being targeted, and he did get a lot of targets. But Garrett Wilson got 22, which is, thank goodness, we needed it. It took all 22 targets to actually get him into the end zone, but that finally happened again, so that was good to see.
Yeah, it took him 22 targets to get just over 100 yards and, very, very end of the game score a touchdown. So, but that's what it feels like right now for the New York Jets. It feels like it's going to take the absolute most to do the bare minimum. And again, like we dropped Devontae Adams in here. We take Allen Lazard off the field and okay, cool. Like we less coverage on Garrett Wilson because that has been an issue. But this offense I at one point said like this offense is not a Devontae Adams away on Twitter. And somebody's like, well, maybe it's like a Randall Cobb away. Maybe it's a Jermichael Finley, David Bakhtiari. I'm like, yeah, maybe it's like it needs to be about 15 years ago for this offense to work too. Because that's what it feels like when you look at the route combinations and stuff like that. It's go routes, it's out routes, and it's little slant routes underneath the coverage, little drag routes and stuff like that. Just they're not stressing teams at all in the intermediate area of the field. It's a stunning lack of passing in the intermediate area of the field, which, by the way, is where you're going to make most of your big plays in today's NFL. So like I said, unfortunately, this is not like a crazy thing to have seen coming. This was definitely in the range of outcomes, that Rodgers the arm is still there, but the mobility is not, and that Nathaniel Hackett's just not an every week advantage. You would just hope that the talent would shine through brighter with guys like Breece Hall and guys like Garrett Wilson, and it probably will in the back half of the year. I just hope that this team hasn't imploded by then, because I do think that we should be on powder keg watch with this team. That's the thing that worries me the most.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Nobody seems happy with anybody else. Aaron Rodgers, 3 interceptions in this game. And that's a guy who prime Aaron Rodgers would go a whole year with like 5 or 6. So three turnovers is just not what you expect from him. Bit of a Hackett versus Coach Flores, bit of a mismatch in this one.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I feel like Brian Flores could have told, the whole thing with the Brian Flores is like, it's disguising the coverages, all that stuff. I feel like he could have lined up and just played the plays and not do anything. I feel like he probably could have told Nate Hackett the damn plays beforehand. Still wouldn't have a way to solve that one. On the Vikings side of things, the fact that we did lead this with talking about the Jets offense and how brutal that was probably will have us gloss over what was definitely Sam Darnold's worst game here. He got out of there for a play too. Both quarterbacks actually got a little banged up in this one. But yeah, Darnold threw an interception, no touchdowns, definitely a shaky passing performance from him. But obviously it was a tough defense that he was going against. And Aaron Jones also left this game with an injury, with a hip injury, and Ty Chandler had to get in the mix there. Didn't go quite as well.
Yeah, well-timed bye week coming up for this team, right? So they get a chance to get healthier because Darnold's been banged up a little bit. The Aaron Jones injury, really unfortunate. Hopefully it's not a multi-week thing. Hopefully he can use the bye to get refreshed and be back out there a week later. Justin Jefferson, still a little bit of noise amidst the chaos, but defensive touchdown was great. I mean, this is a crazy best case scenario for the Vikings to be where they are at this moment. I just keep coming back to the fact that this was the stretch of games that was supposed to lose the job for Sam Darnold and clear the path for JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, coming out of the bye, we've got some very fun games on the docket for these Minnesota Vikings. We get the Lions in week 7, Rams in week 8, Colts in week 9, and Jaguars in week 10. So we could definitely be seeing some high-flying performances. You're right. This is what sometimes takes a little luck, takes a little schedule timing. If you're going to be a great team, you're 5-0 going into your bye when you need it to get a little healthier, lick your wounds a little bit and come back to some potentially nice defensive matchups there. All right, let's stick in the NFC North and go with the Packers 24, Rams 19. Andy, what caught your eye from this one?
Oh man, fun game and a little bit of an unexpectedly fun game. I guess I would say, right? I didn't think this was going to be this. I didn't think it was going to be this close. I thought Green Bay was a pretty even though they were on the road, they weren't really on the road, right? They travel well. I thought they were a pretty good survivor pick, but this was dicey. Great coaches on both sides. Jordan Love had that moment where he went like full Will Levis mode with the underhanded attempt as he was going down that turned like a safety into a defensive touchdown. That's not great. Jayden Reed was awesome. Tucker Kraft was awesome. He followed a big game with like an even better game statistically, a couple of touchdowns, one from distance, one shorter range. That was really good. Run game was good. On the Rams side, man, it's just Kyron Williams and whatever they can patch together, whatever they can manage to slap together with duct tape and popsicle sticks and all that. And man, they need Cooper Kupp back.
They really need Cooper Kupp back, but Jordan Whittington's definitely given him something until Puka Nacua can get back. They've gotten some pretty nice run from Tutu Atwell too. They didn't get any like big downfield bombs, but he at least gave them 10 targets. And yeah, we saw more Blake Corum in this game than we're used to, certainly around the goal line. I think he got tackled at the 1. So just something to keep in mind once we get through the buys and it becomes like full on stash season. He's definitely somebody that you're going to want on your benches in case anything ever happens to Kyron Williams. Man, on the Packers side of it, like Josh Jacobs getting in the end zone was probably the easiest call of the week. Like, this is a rough run defense. He was, not a high scoring fantasy player, but he had all the yards and all the opportunity that you want. Usually that just means there's a lack of touchdowns, and those touchdowns will be coming. They came here. Obviously if you had to start Dontavian Wicks in this one, brutal run out, it should have sent off alarm bells that as soon as like, oh, Romeo Doubs is just suspended now because allegedly he's unhappy with his role, the whole thing. Like the run out was too clean. And everyone was going to say that he was a start this week. So it was definitely not going to work out because that's the way this thing goes. Man, he's a frustrating player because the route running is so good. And obviously I think Jordan Love, underthrew him a couple times and put him into contested situations. But like, dude, you got to win in some of these contested situations every now and again. And maybe don't drop the layups either. Very frustrating player is Dontavian Wicks because, hey, like this is a moment where he could seize, more playing time with whatever's going on with Dobbs and Watson being out. Very disappointing result for him. Probably a guy that's going to get dropped in a bunch of leagues, and then definitely go off next week when neither of those guys play again.
I will also say on the Green Bay side, I just thought their kicker Narveson has struggled a little bit, but listening to Nance and Romo, I mean, you would have thought that Green Bay's kicker was like an undergrad who was trying to kick his way to a scholarship or some. Like they were so sympathetic toward an actual professional kicker who was, just hitting layups.
I mean, I don't know, dude. They also called him Nervous Narvison or whatever.
Nervous Narvison.
Narvison.
Yeah.
They called him Nervous Narvison. And then, at one point, I think Nance said, they got to get him out there to let him build confidence. Romo said, I'm going to let him build confidence on extra points if I'm Matt LaFleur, not kicks. So I think they played it both sides. He's got to switch from 44. I mean, let's get serious here. This is the NFL.
It's a good call.
You can't be running out there with the freaking long snapper number and expect to be taken seriously as a kicker. Narvison. I mean, let's get serious with this. So
that's a good kicker take by you. Good job.
Every now and again, I got one. I can't just let you have all of the good kicker takes here. Speaking of good takes, I want to give one shout out to our good pal, Scott Pianowski, who they did one of those quote graphics, put it on Instagram of him saying, if you can drop Kyle Pitts for Tucker Kraft, you better do it. I would make that move right now. And I, how Instagram works, Andy, I'll tell you, because you don't know anything about this. You can also collaborate on posts. So they invite me to be a collaborator because I'm in the video. So that goes along with the quote graphic. I'm seeing a bunch of absolute freaking knuckleheads come into the comments after Thursday night's game. So, good take. Good thing I didn't listen to you. Good thing I didn't listen to you. And generally, NFL and fantasy Instagram is like the worst. Like comment sections is pretty much the worst place you can be. But because I'm tagging, I'm collaborating this, I can see the comments on my notifications, as I'm looking for recipes and stuff, what normal people do on Instagram, dog pictures, things like. I see all these comments coming in. So of course, I just log this in my brain, and I never go back into the comment section for the most part. But I did this afternoon, like a petty little bastard, went back to some of those people ripping on Scott and like, you sure you're glad you didn't listen? Because I think Tucker Kraft scored 2 touchdowns. Just a reminder to people out there, don't talk until the week's over. Like if you want to come and you want to come
for
talk
sure
on my Dontavian Wicks post, do it 100%. I got to take the L on that one. But don't be coming and trashing Scott, telling you that Tucker Kraft's a better play than Kyle Pitts until he scores 2 touchdowns on Sunday. Give me a break.
I will say sometimes in a reverse jinx kind of way, like if your guy hasn't done anything and it's late in the first half, you should definitely start yelling at fantasy experts and start complaining, because quite often that turns it around.
Yeah, but only do that to Andy. Yeah. I was actually surprised that nobody was trashing me about Dontavian Wicks in the first and second quarter, and that's probably why it didn't turn around. So that is a bummer. But all that matters is that Jayden Reed is a superstar. That's all that matters. Okay. Let's move on to the next game here. Cardinals 24, 49ers 23. Man, this felt an awful lot, Andy, like the Rams game, the Rams 49ers game from week 3, where it's just like, all right, cool. Yeah, man, Brock Purdy's playing some good ball. I know he had the one interception. The second interception, obviously, that was just kind of an unfortunate play. But, he had the one interception early. But for the most part, it's like, man, he's making plays under duress. Brock Purdy's looking good. Brandon Ayuk is back on track. Brandon Ayuk did not forget how to play football. What a wonderful, wonderful result. Like, things are looking good in San Francisco. And then they lose the game.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna lead the same way that you did. It felt so much like the Rams game. I mean, they now have a 1-point loss to the Cardinals and a 3-point loss to the Rams, and it's crazy that both of them happened. Obviously, this one, it relates to the Jake Moody situation a little bit, right? Like not having a kicker that you had any faith in whatsoever and having to pass on field goals and go for it on like 4th and 20 something. Just a disaster situation, not a good recipe. Credit to Arizona though, like they stuck with it beyond their opening drive of the game, which is, apparently Arizona is just the greatest offense in NFL history on opening drives. And then they chill for a little while. And that happened again. Loved Kyler celebrating the 50-yard rushing TD, like when he had barely crossed the line of scrimmage because he knew no one was going to touch him. Sick. Absolutely loved it. That's so badass. But again, like a long lull after the opening drive, and that is kind of the story of their season so far. Trey McBride was so close to a touchdown. I don't know if it's the kind of play that gets classified as a drop exactly, because it's pretty, you really have to flagrantly drop a pass to have it classified as a drop. But it was a catchable touchdown that I'm pretty sure McBride would say he should have hauled in. So that was close. You mentioned the huge Brandon Ayuk game. Finally, like really good to see. He's been getting open all year. Opportunities finally flowed his way, and he was great. But yeah, like it was as if you look at the box score, and it was another game where everybody either got home or had the day that you would have expected from them on the Niner side, and yet they lose by a point. Some extenuating circumstances. Again, the Moody thing is pretty wild, but man, good game for Jordan Mason. He sometimes plays like the whole point of football is to make an appearance on angry runs, but I like watching him. He's super fun.
He is super fun. Obviously lost that fumble late. That was a bummer for him, but he's a super fun runner. The 2-3 49ers will go they'll face the Seahawks. Yeah, I know. They'll face the Seahawks, who lost today on Thursday Night Football. But man, yeah, it's very interesting where the 49ers are right now. Producer Colin made a great point in our chat here where basically said that, if Bosa and Warner don't create a negative play, you can move the ball at will on the 49ers. And it does feel that way sometimes. That defense is, people will do the hyper Brock Purdy analysis for clicks and BS and all that stuff. But the real problem for San Francisco is that I do think this defense is ordinary at best. Like they have two superstars and then it's a whatever unit. Totally feel that way. I want to point out one thing we definitely learned from this game. Apparently James Conner is Tom Brady's favorite football player. Because Brady was on the call on this.
That's a great call.
And he was capital G gushing over James Conner, who is a baller and was the only running back to record a rush in this game for his team. I mean, Trey Benson, whomst is Trey Benson? Yeah, James Conner is going to be one of the better draft values. He looks great out there, and it was actually cool. I will say it was cool to hear the greatest quarterback of all time, or certainly the most the Mahomes stuff. I get it, but like. Lock future Hall of Famer, the GOAT, whatever, Tom Brady, just gushing about the Cardinals like physical brand of football. I thought that was a pretty cool thing as like a football sicko.
We also got like a little bit more proactive rushing version of Kyler Murray. Not a ton. He wasn't, it wasn't one of these Lamar or Jayden Daniels box scores where it's, double digit carries exactly, but they did run him. Great game on the ground, 83 yards on the ground, obviously the long touchdown. So that was really promising to see as well.
Yeah. Again, good for Brandon Ayuk to get this game out of the way. If this is what I was telling people on the show, like if you could live with the fact that Ayuk was going to blow up on your bench because you needed to give him a prove it week, I hope you were able to live with it. Because this was always going to happen. All right, final game here in this section. Giants 29. Seahawks 20. Hey, I thought the Giants were going to do anything without Malik Neighbors. Turned out that is not true. Darius Slayton, because man, somehow all roads always lead back to Darius Slayton in the New York Giants receiver room. He goes for 122 yards on 8 catches with a touchdown.
He's a preferred player for Daniel Jones for sure. It is like, man, it's one thing for Seattle's defense to let Detroit move the ball at will. That's a loaded offense, but it is another thing to give up over 400 total yards at home, not just to the Giants, but to the Giants without Devin Singletary and Malik Neighbors, like a compromised version of the Giants offense. That was really something. I mean, like, credit to Daniel Jones. He was good when he put the ball on the ground, it didn't burn him. And then he was really good thereafter, led some long drives. I thought Tyrone Tracy was great.
Yeah.
Went
not
well
enough talk about Tracy
yards.
leading into this game.
No. And some of that was that you could talk yourself into the idea that maybe Singletary was going to play and then all of a sudden he wasn't. And then, who is it? It's only Gray and Tracy. And Tracy, for people who don't know, he was, for people who don't live in like the depths of the Big Ten like I do, he was a wide receiver at Iowa for 4 years, which is, you're doomed. Your professional trajectory is not great if you're a wide receiver at Iowa. So he smartly got himself to Purdue and actually changed positions, right? So like he is to some extent a classically trained receiver, so he can do a little bit of everything. But man, he looked good as just a pure running back, and he made so many guys miss. Really explosive, made guys miss downfield. I gotta think like Singletary probably comes back from this in week 6. It's a groin injury. I think he returned to practice at the end of the week. So even if he comes back, they got to get Tracy on the field more, because talk about like an exciting change of pace. He was really good.
Get the Bengals in week 6. pretty exciting matchup for Tyron Tracy. So yeah, we'll see, because certainly, I think Singletary is too good of a back to just get completely iced out here, but he's also not so good that you can't keep, you got to get this explosive guy on the field, man, for sure. I mean, Tyron Tracy definitely, he was great in the preseason. It was a really nice deeper sleeper heading into the year. And if you picked him up off the waiver wire, ahead of this game, congratulations, because I think he's going to give you some moments. On the Seahawks side of things, really frustrating game overall. Geno Smith has a couple of long runs in this game, and like that's the biggest highlight from the offense. I am a little concerned about I like the Seahawks offense overall. The receivers are really good. I'm a little concerned that there's kind of just an offensive line anchor on this team that they're not going to be able to get around. And then they're always going to have moments when they go against a good pass rush. Like the Giants got a lot of problems, but they do have good players on the defensive line, that they're just going to have these issues where their offense just gets kind of stuck in the mud.
Like if Geno Smith is picking up 70 some rushing yards, it's not his intent to do that. He's probably getting flushed, right? Takes 7 sacks in this game. There's it's a good yardage game for him. He always seems to have these good yardage games. He came into the week leading the NFL in passing yards, which is a little wild. But it's just like 1 TD a week. And that is not going to pay the fantasy bills for us. At one point in this game, Kenneth Walker had a really quiet day. And I think he might have been my RB3 or something on the week, right? He was coming off a monster performance. At one point, he was like deep into the game. He was 2 carries for 2 yards. He finished with 19 rushing yards. And some of it was just pure game flow. He did salvage some things as a receiver, but it was I'm just looking at the box score of this thing now. So many guys had 4 catches. That it's just kind of a nightmare box score, right? Like the total passing yards were fine. They were over 280, but so many guys had 4 catches. Not a great day for DK Metcalf, and I had expected a big one from him.
Yeah, generally, like, look, you guys who have followed my work for a long time know, I love Tyler Lockett. That's my guy. But if it's the year 2024 and Tyler Lockett's your leading receiver and Geno Smith is your leading rusher, you had a bad day on offense. That's kind of just like the short way around it. This game probably could have been a little closer if they didn't, have a kick blocked at the end there for the Giants. So, all right, on that note, let's take one final break and come back with the games that could have been an email. All right, Andy, we're starting with Commanders 34, Browns 13. One team is the reason this game sunk down to email status. And it's not the team with Jayden Daniels. So before we talk about the Browns, let's throw some flowers to Jayden Daniels, who passed a pretty big test here going against the best defense he's faced this year, probably.
Yeah, we had talked about this in the previous pod. This was not that Cleveland's defense is absolutely top of the ranks, elite, but man, they got some dudes, and they got some dudes at every level. And Garrett's obviously a great player on a Hall of Fame trajectory and all that. And Daniels passed the test. And it wasn't, it's not like he completed 85 or 90% of his throws in this one. But he definitely passed the test, both as a passer and a rusher, proved that he could deliver a big fantasy performance against a defense that we kind of, we fear a little bit. I mean, they're, generally speaking, facing Cleveland, not a great spot. We saw Dak Prescott struggle against that defense in a win. Like, even though they're not winning games, but they got some dudes on defense. So it was absolutely tremendous performance by Daniels. I will say, just a couple times this came up in the game. Like, if you're an edge rusher who's like taking an inside path to Daniels, you have got to get him down, because if he gets outside of you and you don't have like a safety net, it's just a game-changing big play. And he's doing a good job, not exposing himself, even though he's still giving himself up is a little bit of an issue for Jayden Daniels. Sometimes he does a good job like stepping out of bounds. He hasn't gotten completely rocked as often as perhaps I feared he might in the NFL. But again, like if you take that inside path and you don't get him, it's like chasing after offensive rebounds in basketball. Like, if you don't get it, you're giving up numbers the other way, and it's an unfair situation. So, like, both as a rusher and a passer, I thought he was really impressive. And I had tweeted about this at some point, because he has now arrived at the point in the season where, like, we're doing the thing that media members did with Caitlin Clark, where like Jayden Daniels has a combination of like this rushing plateau and this passing plateau and this other thing. And he's the first person to do it in 5 games. And, you know, next week he's going to be the first person to do it in 6 games. Like he's just doing some things at a level that we don't often see rookies do.
Yeah, I thought it was super encouraging today, you know, based on the conversation we had with Nate Tice in the fantasy film room about him like kind of looking to scramble at when that first read isn't there. According to Next Gen Stats, Daniels scrambled 9 times in this game, but he did throw on 3 of those plays, completing all 3 passes for 88 yards. They continued to attack downfield, did the Commanders offense, which I think is super encouraging for the likes of Terry McLaurin, who so close to having a touchdown in this game too. Quickly on the Cleveland side, oh my God. I mean, I tweeted it too. How can they continue to roll this out for like, how much longer can they continue to do it? They're going to do it for another week, according to head coach Kevin Stefanski. He said they're not changing quarterbacks, but it's just like, it's very akin to the analysis that we gave about Bryce Young, which is everybody else knows what's going on here. And yeah, you can do the whole, we get it. The offensive line is not good. There's pass protection issues here, but like Watson hasn't been a plus player in the pocket for since like 4 years ago. Okay. So it's just, it's a disaster in Cleveland right now. And they're getting to a point where just like, they're not even worth talking about because it's the same story every single week.
Yeah. Like Nick Chubb isn't going to make this better. There's nothing that makes this better. You have good receiving weapons on the field. And it's the frustrating thing is that this Deshaun Watson is last year's Deshaun Watson, who was the year before's Deshaun. Like this is the same guy that we've seen for like 3 years now. It's not getting any different. It's not getting any better. I'm not going to promise anybody that the Jameis Winston experience would be notably better, but it would be more fun. And my God, like at some point, everybody knows the the amount of money that you're paying Deshaun. I get it. I get why they're rolling him out there at some level, but man, also sunk cost. We got to try something new because you got a fan base. You've got, other really talented pros out there, and this guy is just not giving you much of a chance to win.
I structured the podcast specifically to go from that very negative note to Bears 36, Panthers 10. So Andy, write us the email about your Bears and their big win today.
Yeah, I mean, I like the huge caveat here is that it was just the Panthers, sure, but this was the first regular season game in which I thought you could pretty emphatically say that the Bears have a talent at quarterback. They kind of they got a dude. 200 yards in the first half. He killed the Panthers when they blitzed. Had some time. Again, he had some time because it was the Panthers. Put some big throws really on the money. He finally hit a deep ball outside the numbers. That was fun to see. The second touchdown to DJ Moore was just a gorgeous ball. Even Caleb's misses were often like right there and on a receiver. So he lost a rushing touchdown to a penalty. Like it was a really encouraging game from Caleb, again, in friendly circumstances, but they get more friendly circumstances next week. They get the Jaguars. So this is a nice little stretch that they're in right now. And like crazily enough, even though it has often looked icky and cringy, they got a real chance to be 4-2 after next week, which is just wild to me. Also, I will say that we saw on Sunday the version of DeAndre Swift that like all of the Swift zealots have been promising us is out there. He was great. He was really good. And like DeAndre in the screen game has been excellent for a couple weeks now. Roschon Johnson did have a couple of short yardage touchdowns, but this is very much DeAndre Swift's backfield.
100%. That's looked like the signing actually made sense, which is good to see.
Mm-hmm.
Caleb Williams, according to Next Gen Stats, excelled on dropbacks over 2.5 seconds, going 12 of 16 for 206 yards and both of his touchdowns. Like, yeah, this second reaction stuff has always been there for him. He just needed to be a little bit more like timing with the wide receivers downfield, and I think we saw that in this game. And you mentioned it. They're in a really good stretch of their schedule right now. They get Jacksonville in week 6 in Chicago, then they go on bye Washington, Arizona, and then New England going into week 10. So this is a good confidence building stretch for Caleb Williams and all the guys there in Chicago. Let's move on to the next game here. Broncos 34, Raiders 19. The Raiders switched quarterbacks in this game. Antonio Pierce did decline to say who's going to be starting next week. I I want to decline to care about that because this, I'm not. Brock Bowers is great.
Yeah.
I think he has the most yards or tied the rookie yardage record for tight ends through his first 5 games. He's going to be doing that every single week, like you mentioned, with rookie tight ends and records and things like that. I mean, who cares, man? This Raiders season is playing out almost exactly like you could have pictured, right? You could have wrote the email of the Raiders story through 5 weeks. You could have wrote that email before the damn season even started. Be like, you're going to switch quarterbacks back and forth. You're going to get to a point where there's going to be a headline. Antonio Pierce declines to say who's going to become, and like Devontae Adams don't want to play for the team, and while Max Crosby's balling out. Great, yeah, could have seen that coming.
Yeah, no surprise against the quality of quarterback play that he faced. That Patrick Surtain had a game, like a huge game. This time with takeaways. He was fantastic. Denver's uniforms, absolutely fantastic. The throwback Orange Crush uniforms are beautiful. Otherwise, though, like this was, I don't know. If you ever wondered what a game would look like if it was an Alexander Madison-based offense against a Javonte Williams-based offense, you got it. Like, here it is.
Didn't, but thanks. Wasn't curious, but thanks.
Yeah, that's what we got in this one. Like Denver's defense is really good. That's all I'll say. Like obviously the quarterbacks they faced were trash by NFL standards, but that is a frisky defense.
Oh, they're gonna muck games like this up all year long. And the funny part is they're gonna probably find themselves. They're 3-2. Their defense is one of the 5 best defenses in the league. They're gonna find themselves in this games that could have been an email section probably every week because you look at the box score on the other side and it's like, yeah, pretty much nothing really relevant. Yeah, Javonte Williams caught 5 for 50. That's great if you had to start him in fantasy. But other than that, it's just like there's no, this target tree looks like a phone book to steal a Scott Pianowski phrase there too. It's crazy, man. The Broncos are a very funny team. I'm dying to know what the week 6 over under between a coming out of the bye, but probably still banged up Chargers team that doesn't want to throw the ball, and this Broncos team in week 6 at 4:05 Eastern next week. That will be an absolute delight. Not a delight. Dolphins 15, Patriots 10.
This was a gross game. This game had so many penalties. This is just an absolutely disgusting game. The Antonio Gibson is going to start thing was purely ceremonial, right? It was just, he got the first carry and then it was Ramondre's game again. I feel bad for, I don't know, Tyreek Hill may or may not be a sympathetic figure, but my God, I was starting to feel bad that I didn't get fantasy points that he like broke up a potential interception. I was like, oh, that's a good play. I should be rewarded for that. I don't know. These are almost unwatchable teams. We talked about it last week. Like it's got to be Drake May time pretty soon. If you can't roll him out against Miami, man, what must he be like?
Yeah, 4.7 yards per attempt for Jacoby Brissett, which is higher than Aaron Rodgers, by the way. In week 5, that's where we're at with the Jets offense. But yeah, I mean, listen, I'm sorry, but if you got duped by the Ramondre Stevenson is benched headlines, like for all the disingenuous goofballs out there, like, I'm sorry, but that was a pretty easy one to see that he was just going to get, he wasn't going to be the nominal starter and he was still going to, like, obviously I lowered in my ranks because of that, but where I had him, if you got better options than Ramondre Stevenson in a demotion, like, congratulations to you. I do not. So I still had to play Stevenson, but I feel bad for people that only read headlines and the goofball headline writers like Ramondre Stevenson benched. Like, obviously he was still going to play. He did. And he ripped off a couple long runs.
There's also a bunch of fantasy managers, and granted, they are not people who are listening, 50 minutes into a podcast. But there are plenty of fantasy managers who they see headlines about starting and they're like, oh man, I got to react to that. Like, it's just like, especially in this NFL, in like the committee backfield era, it's not baseball. Like, it's okay if a guy doesn't start. It doesn't mean he's not going to play.
On the other side of it, Devon Achane left the game with a concussion. Raheem Mostert returned and carried the ball 19 times for 80 yards. So hopefully they can get a run game going in Miami. That would at least help. Definitely concerning if you drafted Achane at the height of his ADP that, they get Jalen Wright and Raheem Mostert in there and suddenly the run game is kind of cooking, not the undersized back. But if he can return to a receiving specialist role, that would be good for him. So obviously we'll track his health updates as the week rolls on, but good to see Mostert back out there. Andy, do you have any awards you want to hand out this week? I say the Vulture of the Week got to be Amir Abdullah in that Raiders game that somehow didn't happen. But I definitely had to desperation start Alexander Madison in one league and knew it wasn't going to go well. Knew that would just be a complete disaster. Obviously that was a terrible choice. It is what it is. Didn't know that I'd be getting texts from friends, at like 5 p.m. They'd be like, Amir Abdullah is still in the league because he vultures a touchdown from Alexander Madison.
I will, if I have to give an award, I don't even know what to call the award, but I think one of my favorite things from the week was actually from the London game. I think it was Minnesota's defense after the defensive touchdown. The Parent Trap handshake celebration was, I love a good touchdown celebration, but the Parent Trap handshake celebration was just like the setting of it, everything about it. It was the perfect touchdown celebration at the perfect moment.
Well, hopefully they didn't do anything that might even hint at guns, or finger guns or whatever, because apparently the NFL just has full authority to just steal money from their players if they do anything that might look like a little gun.
I appreciate the intent there, but man, I don't know. I don't think that's what Josh Downs was doing. We're seeing game affecting penalties in situations where I'm not sure that's what's happening.
The Darius Slayton clearly just did a point the finger thing, and he got a flag for that. Game changing penalties. And dude, I know football players make a lot of money, but some of these guys are on their rookie contracts, and you're slamming them with 4% of their salary. Imagine if you got 4. I don't want 4% of my salary taken away. I'll tell you that, and I don't think these guys do either. So that is my WTF of the week. That award there. Okay. That is going to do it for us today. Andy, I appreciate you, buddy. Congratulations to your Bears. Love to be helped out completely by the Carolina Panthers. And then as a thank you to the Carolina Panthers, Andy Behrens, your franchise stuffs them in a locker. That's very classy of the Chicago Bears. That's going to do it for us today. On Tuesday, Dalton Daldon will be back on the program. He's going to join me for the post-Week 5 People's Panic Meter. Please send in your panic submissions to fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com. I loved that. I think about 5 seconds after the Thursday Night Football game ends, we got at least one Bijan Robinson panic meter. So we'll be good to revisit that one with Dalton. Until then, we are out.